Good morning, everyone. As I said, Chris Garridini with Turnkey Technologies. Thank you for joining us today for our ERP selection webinar. To start, just a quick perspective on who we are and why I'm the person in front of you giving you this presentation. So really, our organization is very focused. We partner with companies to help them transact business better, empowering them to drive customer experiences, employee experiences, and profitability. It's a big deal, and we enjoy it quite a bunch. Leadership, I started the company in 1994. Again, I'm a technical owner, engineering, computer science, math, and I lived in public accounting for 8 years. So I've been doing accounting software and business solutions for 30 plus years. I've been running Turnkey for 27, and so we've got a lot of insight to share with organizations. From an approach standpoint, again, there's this right sizing and configuring solutions that fit every business budget. That bears some credibility in the conversation we're going to have following here. So from a qualifications, again, I've got a large team. There's 50 plus on my team today, highly credentialed group of engineers and accountants, technology professionals. As you think about who we are in the Microsoft space, and again, this is not a Dynamics 365 presentation, but I am a Dynamics partner. And in today's world, when organizations come to see me, we've got a portfolio of the Dynamics products, all of them. There's legacy on-prem, and then there's the new 365 cloud. There's really two major solutions that we look at for ERP. Small, medium, large, as I would say, Dynamics 365, finance and supply chain, as well as Business Central. So we'll talk more about that. Services my firm provides, it's end-to-end. Really, we do a lot of this pre-sales, leadership, vision creation, requirements, solutioning, all the way through business process design. Certainly, we do full implementations, migrations, integration work, analytics development, you name it, and it's really full life cycle from that perspective. From an industry standpoint, we've been in manufacturing for many, many years, professional services, financial services, and even field service and repair. The themes there is managing people and products. Where do they need to be, when, how much, et cetera, et cetera. So that's all you're going to get on me and my firm. Certainly there's more that we could share. I'm including this piece. This is a Microsoft slide, but it's agnostic. And I share this because, you're here today because you're going through digital transformation. Planning is the best way to put it. And this is a great worksheet because it is not a one-time thing, and it doesn't always end up being a big bang approach. But if you think about focusing on outcomes, and as we talk about solution selection, it's imperative. What are we trying to accomplish? Upper left corner, are we trying to engage our customers better? Are we trying to empower the employees better? Are we trying to transform products or operations? A lot of times, a new system is designed just to bring operations current, but there's byproducts. Maybe customers is a secondary focus, but still, we go through a solutioning process, and we talk about optimizing operations, and we drive through this decision chart, and we end up with realizing outcomes once we approve and we move forward on a project. And then it's rinse and repeat. We start over. But digital transformation is small and large in concept. So this is a resource that comes with the presentation. Just a high level, statistically, it substantiates there is a lot of pain out there in legacy applications. Strained growth. I mean, there are people that have different reasons to be looking for new systems, and I can't grow the business. I don't have the features, the capability. Maybe it's disconnected. And if you think about statistically, half of the population out there in business is dealing with disconnected systems, reporting limitations, and outdated and legacy, where we have this contention between platform and the application software. The software won't run on the new hardware. You get it. So just reinforcing that. As we think about just some other positioning on, the problems with legacy business solutions, total cost of ownership. If you do the math, and we have to do the math right, and we look at platform and look at, maybe enhanced or extended support costs to deal with an old solution, there's costs there. There's absolutely costs that can be quantified. We talk about support. It may be the lack of access to qualified resources. I know that some of the old products that we repped, there's just not that many people anymore that support them because they've all aged out, is a nice way to put it. Legacy code, unsupported language. Again, old technology, it's hard to maintain, it's hard to fix it, it's hard to augment it. Productivity. We see a lot of inefficiency in the way the old applications were sculpted. As we look at new technology and new visioning around solutions, there's a more intuitive, more thoughtful approaches to business process execution. Security. Again, legacy apps, they don't integrate with Azure Active Directory or any of the how are we authenticating? Is it separate to log into my business app versus my office versus my et cetera, et cetera. So security is not always in consideration there. Extensibility, expansion. Again, we want to grow our businesses. We need a platform that allows us to grow our businesses and scale and add capability as required. Platform availability, that's hardware. Again, if we go back to new hardware, old software, there's contention there. Integration technologies. I have a project I'm doing for somebody now because they just can't add partners to their current system. And it's costing them money. It's costing them opportunity. Compliance, industry validation. Again, there's people that'll frown on you. And if you're trying to do more with your company, whether it's lending or a public offering, you have to have the right systems in place to glean confidence in your business management. It's a big deal. You know, people that are on QuickBooks, there's a lot of questions if you're running your business on QuickBooks and you're trying to substantiate that you've got good controls. And I put that missing out on all the cool stuff. There is a lot of cool stuff out there. So as we dig into this and, you know, just some high-level topics as we think about what I'm going to present, different approaches for small versus large companies. You know, ERP selection can be very formal or it can be less formal, informal. And I think, you know, everybody has to decide is, you know, what mode do I need to operate in? And again, larger companies, larger processes, more constituents, even this internal versus external. Do I have to go hire a consultant? Do I have to hire a consulting firm to do a software selection for me? So that's a much more formal process and it's expensive. But at the end of the day, it may be the right thing for your business. And I think everybody's got to make that decision. I make this comment, know what size solution you're seeking, small mid-market versus mid-market enterprise. There are different classes of applications out there. Again, even in my world, I said, well, okay, I'm selling Dynamics 365 Business Central that fits small mid-market, and I sell 365 Finance and Supply Chain, which is mid-market enterprise. I can quickly ascertain if an organization should track towards the larger or the smaller system. Again, sometimes it's based on revenue, sometimes it's based on headcount, sometimes it's based on complexity of requirements, but you got to have some idea of what you're looking for there, if it's enterprise class versus a small mid-market type solution. Some organizations approach this process where they go direct to a single solution based on research, and then they find qualified vendors or partners. There's an example where, you know, Turnkey is a Microsoft Dynamics partner. I have people that show up in my door because they want Microsoft Dynamics. Well, then we still have the decision, Business Central, Finance and Supply Chain, and we go through that process. And sometimes I'm one of 3 Microsoft partners where the customer knows what they want and but they're talking to 3 different partners to get those different perspectives. It's all important, but I think that, you know, as you're planning this is, am I going through a formal process? And the outline that I'm presenting here is really geared towards a more formal process. However, you could run it internally depending on the size of your organization. So if we think about my outline, you know, the overview of successful ERP selection, you know, we're going to talk about selection team. We'll talk about requirements gathering. We'll talk about system specifications, vendor services. We'll talk about ROI. It's very important as we look at ROI. Vendor solution shortlisting, vendor selection, and then some don'ts. So again, let's get into this thing. So if we think about selection team, and the imperative here is without creating a good team, you may not have full representation of your organization and the needs and the requirements. And I think bias is a very important word because a lot of people are biased. And when we use the example of informal, people could have an informal process that's biased based on, well, I showed up at the organization. I know the system. Somebody is not muted. Zach, could we mute everybody on the call, please? So again, as we think about this is in the organization is who's the lead? Okay, you need a champion. So somebody has to own this and be a project lead for this. This is the selection project lead. Doesn't necessarily mean they're a project manager. It will participate in driving the delivery, but it's important that you have somebody in the organization that's identified. And again, depending on your organization size, you know, we do a lot of this outline here, but to assemble a team that represents different stakeholders. And if you think about process owners as a term that we use, meaning I've got somebody that's all over inventory and warehouse. Great. I've got somebody else that's over procurement. I've got somebody else that's in sales. I've got somebody else that runs production. I've got finance. You get it. And so there's different stakeholders that need to be involved. So if you think about the cross-section, this next level, it's user groups. And one thing we have to be careful about is we don't want too many people in the room or no decisions can be made. So that's why we focus on these process owners that really know the business, processes. But below them, there's groups of users. And part of this plan is, as we go through a process, we're building adoption. And if people aren't participating and then you tell them, hey, we picked a new system, they're like, I didn't pick it. So there's part of that is you get consensus and you get these people to weigh in on top of mind and problems or challenges. And it's often interesting that we find that when somebody that wasn't in the selection group shows up and says, well, we do it this way, and the process lead didn't know that. So important to get good sampling. C-level sponsor. Again, you need an executive. You need somebody that's going to make a decision. And again, this is how big is the org? Senior management, again, some companies don't have that size of an executive team, but at the same time, you need who owns this project. And a lot of times it could be operations, VP of Ops. It could be the CFO. Those are common roles depending on where the big pain is in the organization. External requirements for consulting expertise. This is that formality. Do I need somebody to come in and run this process for me? I've had organizations that were so screwed up, and I hate to say that, but they were, and they just couldn't agree on anything, and they needed a third-party mediator to come in and analyze the business and help them build requirements and do this process objectively is probably the right word. If we go that route with an external party, get a selection list of consultants. Who's doing this? Who does it successfully? What size companies do they work with? What size industry? So this is an external firm that's just going to help you manage a selection process. And they're going to have their own agenda. It may resemble some of the things I have on here, but certainly this is a good framework for you to keep people accountable. Again, you're defining roles, responsibilities in the selection team. So selection team is imperative. Right size, not too large, not too small, good representation. If we think about requirements gathering, and I've got an illustration that I'll share with you, this can be simple, this can be complex. And I think that, again, based on your organization size and what's the current in-place system, some systems are huge and they're connected to everything. Those are certainly much more complex landscapes because part of this process is deciding, well, what am I trying to replace? Am I replacing everything? And we call that the big bang versus as you really analyze the landscape of what's connected and what has to go all together, right? Oh, I've got these three systems, they're bolted together. I need to replace all three of them at the same time versus I'm sitting here on QuickBooks and it's not integrated to anything, but I have this other custom app that does my shop floor. Great. Can QuickBooks go first? The shop floor comes second. You get some flexibility there, but still you have to understand what am I replacing? And then as we go back to this requirements process, the devil's in the details. I really think it is. And the articulation is business processes that are in scope, identifying bottlenecks, shortcomings of existing systems. And why do we want to do this? Because we don't want to end up in the same place we are today. Key business challenges you aim to solve. This is important. It's like, what do we want to get? And we use that term outcomes. So if you go back to the digital transformation, we talk about outcomes. When I change systems, I expect to be able to do this. Or I want to be able to do this, or I'm going to be able to go after this opportunity. So as you think about consulting the functional departments to understand their business challenges, and now we're getting deeper into the conversation here. I think an important thing here is how do I document? How do I define? How do I gather? How do I organize? So there's some real challenges here. Requirements for each department to address their challenges. And again, you have to be careful here because all of a sudden you end up with these unwieldy lists of requirements and it's like, how do I manage it? How do I vet it? Integration requirements between line of business applications, key partners, business intelligence requirements, constituents, who's going to consume this, what's it need to do. We may not live and have the dashboards we have today, but to do a due diligence and have these requirements very formally defined is going to help you, especially when you get into vetting solutions and you say, is this out of the box or do I have to build it? And I think as you're trying to assess systems, all of the things I've mentioned here are important. So again, you're documenting these, you're assigning priority values. I've got RFP documents that I received that have 1, 2, and 3. 1, have to have. 2, would be nice. 3, optional. I think you get the concept there. Taking the final requirements back to your user groups to make sure they look at it, they vet it, there's nothing missing. So again, you're trying to come up with this roadmap of here's the requirements that we really have, and we have to be careful. Just as I said, what's phase, what's 1, what's required, what's 2, what's option, would be nice, and then that way we don't disqualify solutions that meet a lot of that potential. So, so again, we end up with a final requirements list. So as you think about moving on to system specifications, and again, you're defining some framework here because even when someone shows up to me, I'm asking these questions. Total number of users, and I put and types who will require system access. There are different types of users. There's full users, there's warehouse users, there's team member users, so light, real small footprint. Some of these people are just consumption. They just are reporting constituents, meaning they get to drill down and do BI, but they don't do a transaction. So doing a map there, a lot of times we talk about put your users into a spreadsheet and add columns so that you go through and define what they do that helps us drive to a licensing type eventually. Preferred delivery platform, cloud on-premise hybrid. Cloud is all we're selling these days. The on-premise is, you have to be careful that you don't have IT fiefdoms where the IT guy wants it on-prem so he keeps a job. IT still has a job even in the cloud. Let's just not be confused about that. Hybrid means it's cloud and it's on-prem. We have a production facility that If they lose the internet, they can continue to process because they have an on-prem data collection, barcoding thing for their food production, but it syncs to the cloud. So that's a hybrid example. Mobile access requirements. Do I have people out in the field? Do we want tablets? Do we want desktops? Where are the constraints? Where are the limitations on the applications that we're going to look at? But making sure we think through that. Mobile device compatibility. You know, sometimes companies have a field, oh, I got 40 handhelds. Well, they may not work with the new software. So, but we're always trying to assess is, do I need handhelds? Is that in the warehouse? Is that in the field? Another big one is offline system access requirements. Not all cloud-based systems are going to work offline. There are some where there's a local app on a handheld, and if it loses its connectivity, I can still do business. And then when the internet comes back, or I get my 4G, 5G, it'll sync back up. But it's very important to understand that. And if we're doing field services, we may be in rural markets where I just don't have internet. Language and currency requirements, documenting existing hardware environments, network environments. This is all part of that process and really mapping out our landscape. As we think about vendor services, and again, we use the term vendor, you know, is it publisher versus vendor? Sometimes the publisher is the vendor. Sometimes the publisher is Microsoft, and then Turnkey is the vendor. I'm an implementation partner. But as you think through this, it's like, what services do I need? And, you know, it's interesting that a lot of people won't replace their own ERP. They do want to leverage an external organization. And we think about scope and delivery method. You know, how's it going to be done? Today, we're doing everything remote. I have customers asking me, do you come on site? We can. My guys are on site with masks doing warehouse type things, but a lot of this is all done virtual through team meetings and sessions just like this. Training, scope, and delivery, how's it going to be done? Classroom, on site, remote, implementation, consulting. You know, how much of that do I need? And again, very few people are buying a system and implementing it themselves because they don't know the product, and it's not a very efficient approach. External PM, I'm going to say internal PM as well. You know, a lot of orgs that show up don't have a project management discipline. We have a project management discipline, but I think as you look at projects of this nature, you have to have imperative project management on both sides to be successful. Data protection, security, compliance requirements. I deal with civilian government contractors. Sometimes they have requirements that normal companies don't. So we have to address those up front. And as we're vetting solutions, does it meet those requirements? There's critical data sets and legacy systems, expectations of converted data. It's a big deal to think through that. It's like, hey, I've been using it for 20 years. Do I get 20 years of GL history moved? Typically, those things aren't happening. But I think you have to have an opinion of what data is imperative in your business and have some expectations of what's going to be converted. And this all helps you define this framework that the vendors are going to participate in bidding against. Data migration requirements, okay? And then what if we don't move it all? How do I get access to that data? How do I consolidate it into reporting? If I wanted to see sales for 10 years, but we only converted 1 year of history. All big details. External requirements for system and network maintenance. So again, we're documenting, we're defining, trying to understand what do I need from external services as I move through this. ROI is a big deal. So I own Turnkey 26, I'm in my 27th year, and you know, we talk about total cost of ownership and return on investment. That's what those terms mean. And total cost of ownership is once I'm on the system, you know, we got the big lift in the year one, but licensing and what's my recurring cost, right? Is it just licensing? Is there some maintenance? But as we look at that total cost of ownership, that's a long term. And what we should do when we compare systems is I've used 5 years. What's it going to cost me for 5 years to own and operate this? Okay, great. There's a number. Maybe you want to use 3, but that's how you frame up total cost of ownership. That's licensing and services, it's maintenance. ROI is the next part. Now that you know what this total cost is, how do I calculate a return on investment? And see the second bullet, forecast the value of each system requirement within the specified time frame. That's minutia. There's a lot of details, and I've got some examples that I can show as I just jump around here. And you know, if you think about this document that I'm sharing just for a second, statistics. And so statistics help us define return on investment. Managing consolidations, managing month end. What's the low, what's the high savings? How do I come out and quantify that in dollars? And this is a pretty detailed list, this document that I have, but as you know, we were talking about requirements, and just to show you complexity, somebody's thought through this and they've built these out and said, okay, wow. And here's the big impact, because this example was probably a service corporation. They're looking at the potential savings because they increase the efficiency of the field workers could result in another $672,000 in income. So different examples, but this is how we substantiate an ROI. And while I'm in the document, and you see all the tabs here, these are requirements, detailed by sales, by inventory, by jobs, by service, by rental, by equipment, on and on and on. So understand that requirements document can be a very very complicated. Let me flip this back again here. Okay. So interesting information. And again, I always joke about, do I have to give them a 1,300 questionnaire to fill out to figure out what system they need? That was the earlier comment. Do we do big? Do we do small? What's the right answer? So system requirements, ROI, change management. Change management is imperative here because it impacts forecasts. How do we do change management where we don't disrupt the business and have an impact in revenue? There's a human side of change management I'm not talking about here, but that's where we look at managing the people side, get away from the technology. I'm mentioning it, but just be aware of that. So again, you do this ROI calculation, you use a document like I just showed you where you've got some of these minutiae. How much do I get by these little incremental savings? There's a great one on document management. If I scan paper instead of moving paper, how much does it cost me per AP transaction? It's a perfect example out there. And those are things we can help with. So again, what you're doing is you're forecasting the costs, okay, within a specified time frame. I've got licensing, I've got services, you got an Excel spreadsheet that's holy cow. I've got all of this cost, okay? And again, you're finalizing ROI with some accountants because I do that even in my org. I have people rationalize and give me good data. It's all about the data. So we compare these costs, other projects. I think that's important because we do consider this investment. And again, based on the size of the organization, you got to have some idea of what your tolerance is for investment. Is it 100,000? Is it 500,000? Is it $1 million plus? Your org side is going to substantiate some of that. But the ROI is also going to give you some comfort that I spend $1 million, I'm going to get back 5. That's easy math if you do your homework correctly. So again, as this data rolls up, it ends up getting in the hands of senior management. You need formal approval. Great, I've got a blessing on this and I can now move ahead. And one of the false starts is you don't get the approval, you don't do all this homework, and you come out and find it and everybody says, I can't approve this. I don't know how we're gonna pay for it. An ROI substantiates how you're gonna pay for the solution. So then as we talk about moving through this, vendor solution shortlisting, how do I know who to look at? Okay, and these are some tips. Research ERP solutions used by similar companies in your industry. Hey, I'm a chemical manufacturer. I've got a friend who owns a chemical manufacturing company. I'm like, what do you use? Associations are another one of these consortiums where, if you're in a distributor organization association, like what's the popular product? And you might find 5 or 6, or hey, we use this one. It works really, really well. That's the beginning. Again, industry. A lot of people will go down into industry solutions that are real specific. That really depends on your business and the nature of your business. And the reason I say that is some solutions may be more generic. In the third bullet, solutions with offer some support in your industry. Again, my packages I represent aren't built for the chemical industry. However, standardly in the system, I support process manufacturing, which means I can implement it for a chemistry or a chemical manufacturer without any augmentation. Where it gets tricky is, oh, well, we manufacture food and well, great, I do process, but there may be enhanced requirements there that lead us down to an industry solution, meaning maybe I need to track allergens. That's very granular around foods and recipes, just an example. So again, we're building a short list of vendors. If we take a look at the list of vendors, we look for competitors, add those guys to the list. So again, this is the formal process where we're not being biased and we're trying to see who really should be considered. And then there's this RFI. This is a request for information. And again, what do you want to ask these vendors that rep these solutions? And remember, publisher, Microsoft, vendor, Turnkey. There may be other vendors that represent Microsoft. You would be sending an RFI to a Turnkey. Now, there's other publishers that are the vendor, which means you may be sending it direct to them. So you've got questions, the data comes back. You narrow shortlist based on RFI responses. And I think the comment that's not there that should be is, how do I measure them? How do I objectively score them and score the RFI responses to know that, okay, I've made good picks, or I didn't dismiss somebody arbitrarily, or etc. So again, keep moving. We're compiling requirements and business processes into an RFP. This is a request for proposal. So this is formal. And again, some people are formal, some people are informal, but RFP is absolutely a formal process. To narrow the shortlist based on RFP responses. It's the same type of thing. What's the RFP? How much is the project going to cost? How are you going to do it? Quote me licensing, quote me services. Tell me why you're special. Give me some references. So again, there's a lot of criteria that go into this request for proposal document. And when they come back, what's the scoring? How do I objectively eliminate? I'm including this document. It's who are the leaders? And so this is a great example. Hey, if I'm going to look at new ERP software, same thing. Am I looking at big systems? Am I looking at small systems? And I think, if you think, well, If I'm a $50 million company, I'm probably not going to go look at Oracle or JD Edwards. I probably won't look at SAP. I don't know. That's just my perception that they may be too big for me. Dynamics, okay, there's 2 flavors there. All right, let's include that. NetSuite's got a lot of popularity. Maybe we should talk to NetSuite, and so forth. In this area over here, you see this IQMS. Okay, well, what does that system do? I've got friends that own companies injection molding, plastics injection molding, and they're like, oh, we love IQMS because it goes deep into that type of an industry. There's the example of the industry play. But again, a document, an illustration like this will give you a pick of, okay, who's out there, who's really doing good, and even within these solutions, you're still asking for what's the industry personalization. And there's add-ons that give you that industry personalization. So again, this is a resource for you. As we continue, vendor selection. And now we're down to, we've got 3 people. You got Microsoft, you got NetSuite, you got Sage. Great, what are we going to do? Well, we need a performance test. How do I pick from those 3? You know, the prices are the same, the software looks the same. Well, here we are, software demonstrations. Okay, this is the performance piece. And I put define scenarios. And you need these people to compete consistently. And so to build the selection teams, to attend the demos, including people from the user group. And again, now you're going to witness what your business process will look like in this target solution. Okay, is it generic? Do you provide them with specific scenarios so they set up a customer, an item, a bomb, or whatever it may be that looks like your stuff? That makes it more meaningful. So again, don't be afraid to push for that. Define the scoring method. Again, you got 3 different groups coming in and performing. What's the criteria? How do we keep it objective and so forth? So again, then you're booking demonstrations with these vendors. You're giving them your scenarios. You want them to prep. We talk about doing due diligence on references. That's important. Who have they done a project that looks like yours, that looks like your business, that looks like your industry, that's about the right size of your project? So again, request for quotation. Great. Now we really want the pricing from these 3 guys, their final proposals. Again, you've got a committee that's evaluating requests for quotes. Scoring method, is it all about price? It shouldn't be all about price. Excuse me. So again, this make final selection decision. Okay, how's that done? Is it price? Is it this? Is it that? There's got to be criteria. There's got to be a scoring method that your organization agrees on. And then you proceed to contract negotiations with that vendor. Agree on terms, purchases, you get it, implementation. And then you're getting the documentation to your team. So everybody's on the same page as what has been agreed upon, what's been contracted, and that's important to have both sides of the fence involved there. So when we talk about choosing a vendor, and again, thank you, Michelle Murray, for the slide. This is really, I did the About Turnkey, and it's a flash, but if you think about how do I pick? And, how do people get to me? They get to me because of industry experience. They get to me because I'm 27 years in the business, because of the size of our team, because of our geographical location, because of our culture, because of our pricing, because of our capacity, because of our references, and because of methodology. And, I throw this in here because we talk about project management, and, methodology drives my success as a business owner and as an implementation partner. And when you approach a project like this for your organization, you've got to be adamant about that. And you've got to be adamant about these vendor qualifications and really getting an alignment on who you're going to be partnering with, because that is exactly what it is. This is a partnership. It's not the typical transaction. You're intertwined. You're working together. You've got teams that have to work together. You're looking for subject matter experts, professionalism, and we come back to this again, methodology. How do we manage? How do we deliver? How do you get assurances that this project's going to be done correctly? And that's what I said. There's client-side project management. Sometimes you have to hire somebody if you don't have somebody. A lot of organizations don't have a PM because they're not running that many projects. So again, another resource is you understand, well, how do we do this? What's it look like? And even methodology implies timing. Most of these, are they 3 to 6 months? They could be longer. We've got projects that can run 12 to 18 months. These are large, complex, replacing lots of different pieces all at the same time. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of coordination. And within these alignments here, you see these conference room pilot, another conference room pilot, another conference room pilot, yet a third one as you go from simple to complex to more complex to prove out readiness, and then run the system. But again, it takes a lot of coordination, a lot of discipline, a lot of management. Things you shouldn't do. Don't bypass the C-suite. Okay, I'm the guy that owns this company. It's funny that I'll hear about things that are going on. I go, hey guys, yeah, I haven't seen anything, so don't get your hopes up that it's going to be approved. So early interaction with your C-suite and just in terms of vetting a project and so forth. Assume the process efficiency will remain at 100%. People get distracted. You know, an implementation can cost more than just the cost of the implementation. I think that's got to be factored in your implementation costs. What's going to be the lost productivity? What about the distraction? How about the team members having to allocate time to practice, to study, to learn? So there's a lot of things there. So again, don't assume. Don't ignore training. And I think that even my challenge is self-help. You know, people engage too late. I've watched groups, and I don't name names, but I use the analogy. It's like riding around on a bus for 6 months, and they showed up time to go live. They're like, oh, we're here, and it's, come on, you've got to be involved, you've got to be engaged, and there are self-help mechanisms out there. Once you've picked a system, there's a lot of resources out there for people to learn. The partner is going to deliver training as well. We do. It's later in the phases because there's training throughout these conference room pilots. They're interactive and so forth. Don't forget to factor in implementation costs, okay? And as I said, the other costs of the soft costs. What am I missing? What other risks out there that could have a cost that I haven't anticipated? So we don't want to come back later and tell management, hey, guess what? I missed by 50,000. And I think even as you go back to vendor management is what's the contracts? Is it fixed price? Is it not to exceed? There's always going to be change orders that have to be agreed upon and so forth. But again, you want your ROI to be as close as possible. You know, the recovery plan is interesting as everybody thinks, okay, what happens if it doesn't work? Okay, typically you're not burning down your legacy system to light up a new one, okay? So normally, okay, we have a fallback plan, but you got to have a fallback plan. You absolutely do, and I think even as you talk about contingencies, do you have some with respect to the vendor? I've had somebody ask me just the other day, can we do the analysis phase, and what if we decide to stop right there? I'm like, that's legit, because what their concern was is we went through an analysis phase, and we really dug into the details, is that the scope of the project might change where all of a sudden it's outside of the budget. So now we go back to how accurate are your requirements that are presented to your vendors for them to provide their pricing against. It's imperative that that's done correctly. Don't exceed more than 10 solutions. You know, again, there's a blur factor there, and then there's a productivity factor there. So again, you can spend a lot of time and money doing an ERP selection. If you're running it internally, you don't want to pick 10. You don't need to pick 10, in my opinion. You know, that don't purchase beyond your requirements. I use the analogy, it's like going to a restaurant. I know what I want for an app, I want a salad, I want an entree, and I want dessert, but guess what? I don't buy dessert when I order my appetizer, and I don't want it sitting on the table for 6 months. And there's that example where we want to have a full vision of the solution. And I think as an owner, I want to know that everything's out there I want to do, but I don't want to buy it all right now. And that's what this really speaks to. There's core functionality. You need to replace certain systems. And then as long as there's a plan to incrementally do that. We do believe in land and expand and incremental implementation. There's more success there than doing big bang when you do big bang on disconnected pieces. Assuming cloud is better because it's newer, you know, again, is that for everybody? Different orgs, different models. Certainly in my world, cloud is the only answer. So, you know, everything I'm selling for Microsoft is in the cloud, and high availability, we're very confident there. But there are people that have local requirements, and it may be, again, you still have to evaluate those is the point. So that's it from me. I want to thank you for attending. Like I said, there's going to be a push out of this content. Our organization is very interested in helping people find the right solution. Certainly you've heard my positioning. If you come to meet with us, we've got 2 flavors of Microsoft Dynamics ERP, the Business Central product and the finance and supply chain product. Small, medium, medium, large. Highly capable solutions, and again, we'd love to engage with you and help you if you want a semi-formal evaluation process. We do conduct those for clients, but I'm going to stop there and thank everybody for participating.